I'm Hannah. I'm 33. And on my parents' 40th anniversary, my own mother shoved my daughter's gift across the table and called me her biggest mistake. 60 guests, white tablecloths, a banner that said 40 years in gold foil. My 8-year-old standing there with her hands still open, holding nothing. My father stood up. He didn't whisper. He didn't pull me aside. He looked at me the way you'd look at someone tracking mud onto clean carpet. And he said it loud enough for the whole room to hear. None of them knew. Not my mother, not my father, not my golden child brother grinning from the head. What sat inside that cream-colored box with the navy ribbon my daughter tied herself? Hold on to the box. You'll need it later. 5 days after that party, they couldn't stop calling. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where we tell quiet stories about families, betrayal, and the dignity it takes to walk away. If a story ever made you feel less alone, that's why we're here. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. Here's my story. The morning of their anniversary, I stood in my kitchen with wrapping paper, tape, and a stack of documents I'd spent 3 weeks putting together. Lily sat cross-legged on the floor with a navy grow grain ribbon between her teeth, trying to curl it with scissors the way she'd seen on a craft channel. She was 8 and convinced she could do anything a YouTube tutorial showed her. The curl came out lopsided. She grinned like she'd built the Eiffel Tower. "It's perfect," I told her. She'd also drawn a card the night before. 2 stick figures holding hands under a wobbly arch of hearts. Happy 40 years, Grandma and Grandpa. In her best cursive, which leaned hard to the left like it was trying to escape the page, she tucked it into the cream-colored box herself right on top of the manila envelope. I caught my reflection in the microwave door. Blazer, hair pulled back, a title attorney who handled million-dollar closings without flinching. And here it was, nervous about handing my own mother a gift. Some part of me, the stubborn part I could never quite talk out of hopping, believed this would be the thing that finally changed the math. 40 years of marriage, their daughter and granddaughter at the door. A gift that could genuinely save them, though they didn't know they needed saving yet. I pressed the lid down. Lily smoothed the ribbon one more time with her thumb. "Mom, do you think they'll cry?" I smiled at her. Maybe, baby. I'd spent more than I'll ever admit getting this gift right. The money wasn't the hard part. The hard part was still wanting to give it all. Growing up in the Jagger house, the pecking order was simple. Derek came first. I came whenever. My brother was 4 years older, and from the day he was born, my parents treated him like a project they'd gotten right on the first try. Football trophies on the mantle, report cards pinned to the fridge, birthday parties with themes, matching plates, a guest list my mother organized 2 weeks in advance. Then there was me. I was the pregnancy my mother hadn't planned. She was 30, just about to re-enroll in nursing school after years of raising Derek. She told me once, pouring coffee on a Sunday morning like she was commenting on the weather, "You were always my biggest mistake, Hannah. I don't mean it ugly, I mean it factual." I was 11. I remember the mug she was holding. Blue chipped on the rim. She never hit me. She never screamed. She just had this way of making me feel like I was taking up space that had already been allocated. Derek got the birthday parties. I got a cake from the grocery store and a card signed by both parents in my mother's handwriting. My father, Roger, was a quieter version of the same math. He loved me the way men of his generation loved their less favorite kids, politely, from a distance, without ever once going to bat for me when it mattered. He followed my mother's lead the way he followed weather forecasts. Noted them, didn't argue. By the time I left for college on a partial scholarship and 2 part-time jobs, I'd already learned the house rule. Derek was the investment. I was the overhead. I didn't hate them for it. That's the part people never understand. I just got tired. At 25, I got pregnant with Lily. The father was a boyfriend who stayed long enough to hear the word positive and then discovered a sudden interest in living abroad. My parents' reaction was a conference call. Yes, a conference call, during which my mother said, "Another mistake." And my father said, "We can't help you financially, Hannah. You understand." I understood perfectly. I worked as a title clerk at a small real estate firm during the day. Filed deeds, pulled liens, typed legal descriptions until I could recite subdivision plat numbers in my sleep. Nights I studied for the bar. Lily slept in a pack and play next to my textbooks. Some semesters I ate ramen so she could eat the jarred organic sweet potatoes my coworker's wife swore by. 3 years, 2 failed bar attempts, 1 pass. By 30, I was a licensed title attorney at a mid-size firm in Richmond. By 32, I was handling commercial closings worth more than every house on my parents' street combined. I learned to read a property file better than I could read my own mother. But here's the thing about building yourself from scratch. You get good at carrying weight. Too good. I was the friend who always picked up the phone, the colleague who stayed late, the daughter who still sent birthday cards to a woman who opened them, read them, and never once called to say thank you. Over-responsibility was my operating system. I didn't know how to put something down. If there was a fire, I grabbed the hose, even when the people inside the burning building were the ones who'd handed me matches and told me to leave. Professional isolation was just a side effect. I didn't have time for friends. I had briefs. The invitation arrived in April. Cream card stock, gold embossed. Roger and Diane Georger celebrating 40 years of love, laughter, and family. The RSVP card had a little box for dietary restrictions and a line that read, "Number attending." I stared at it for 2 days. Lily found it on the kitchen counter and lit up like a sparkler. "We're going to Grandma and Grandpa's party." She said it the way kids talk about Disney World. Capital letters, exclamation points, wide open-end belief that this time would be different. And that was the thing. Lily wanted grandparents. She wanted the cookies and the lap and the stories at bedtime and the Christmas stockings with her name stitched on them. She wanted what her friends at school had. She didn't know the math. She just knew she was missing something. I almost threw the invitation away. Almost. But I'd just come into possession of something that could change everything between us. A gift so specific, so necessary to their survival that even my mother would have to look up. I couldn't tell Lily what it was. I couldn't explain the foreclosure filings or the defaulted HELOC or the fact that her grandparents' house was 60 days from being auctioned to the highest bidder. She was 8. She knew the box had a ribbon and a card she drew and something important inside. "We're going," I told her, "and we're bringing the best present they've ever gotten." She hugged me so hard my ribs cracked. Figuratively, mostly. I checked the box for 2, wrote our names, dropped it in the mail before I could change my mind. Hope is a strange tax. You keep paying it even when the returns are garbage. A week before the party, my cousin Jenna called to warn me. "Your Aunt Carol's been talking again." Carol was my mother's younger sister, and she had a gift for turning gossip into gospel. According to the version circulating through the family, and through my parents' church, and through half the neighborhood, I was the ungrateful daughter who refused to let my parents see their granddaughter. I was cold. I was selfish. I had issues. The truth was simpler and uglier. Every time I'd brought Lily to visit over the past 3 years, my mother treated her the way airport security treats a suspicious bag. Inspected her, found something wrong, moved on. Lily's hair was messy. Lily talked too much. Lily reminded her of me. The last visit, 8 months ago, my mother had looked at Lily arranging flowers on the kitchen table and said, "She's got your father's chin, the wrong one," meaning my father, the boyfriend, the other mistake. I stopped visiting after that, not to punish them, to protect my kid. But Aunt Carol's version was better theater. Poor Deanne, weeping at Bible study about the granddaughter she never gets to see. Roger, stoic and heartbroken. The whole congregation shaking their heads at the heartless daughter. Lily heard fragments. Kids always do. One night, brushing her teeth, foam around her mouth like a tiny rabbi'd professor. "Mom, will Grandma like me this time?" I knelt down and wiped toothpaste off her chin. "Grandma's complicated." "Sweetheart, but will she like the present?" "She'd be crazy not to." Lily nodded, satisfied. She trusted me the way I used to trust my mother, completely without auditing the books. I carried that weight all the way to the car the morning of the party. 3 weeks before the invitation, my father had called me. This was unusual. Roger Georger communicated primarily through my mother, the way nations communicate through ambassadors. If he had something to say, he relayed it to Diane or relayed it to me with editorial commentary. Direct calls from my father happened roughly as often as solar eclipses. Hannah. His voice had a strange texture, rough at the edges. How's the market out there? House is selling. I was sitting at my desk reviewing a title commitment for a commercial strip mall. The market's fine, Dad. Interest rates are holding. Why? Just curious. Your mother watches those shows. You know, the flipping ones. He paused for so long, I checked to see if the call had dropped. Dad, what's a house like ours worth these days? Ballpark. I gave him a number. He made a sound. Not quite a word, not quite a cough. Something between acknowledgement and pain. Everything okay with the house? I asked. Fine, everything's fine. Your mother's calling me for dinner. You take care. He hung up before I could push. I sat there for a minute, phone still warm against my ear, trying to decode what had just happened. My father didn't ask about real estate. My father barely asked about the weather. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe he was thinking about refinancing. Maybe Mom wanted new kitchen cabinets. Maybe he was just lonely and house prices were the only language we shared. I filed it under weird but harmless and went back to the strip mall. 2 days later, a file landed on my desk that made my hands go still. Every Tuesday, my firm pulled the weekly foreclosure docket from the county recorder's office. Public record routine. I usually skimmed it between coffee and my first closing. Addresses, lender names, trustee sale dates. Most of them were strangers' problems. That Tuesday, one address punched me in the sternum. 1847 Burwood Lane. My parents' house. The house I grew up in. The house where Derrick got birthday parties with matching plates and I got grocery store cake. The house where my grandmother once lived in the back bedroom and braided my hair every morning before school. The only person under that roof who made me feel like I belonged there. I read the address 3 times, pulled the full notice of trustee's sale. There it was printed on county letterhead. A sale date already counting down, a default amount that made my stomach drop, and a lender I recognized from dozens of other distressed property files. They were losing the house. Not slowly, not theoretically. The clock was already running. 7 weeks. And whoever showed up at the courthouse steps with the highest bid would own 1847 Birchwood Lane. Every room, every memory, every square foot of the backyard where my grandmother planted roses that still bloomed every May. My father's phone call snapped into focus like a Polaroid developing. What's a house like ours worth these days? Ballpark. He hadn't been curious. He'd been terrified. I closed my office door, pulled the lender file, started reading. I didn't call my parents. They hadn't called me not to ask for help, not to warn me, not to say a single honest word about the fact that the roof over their heads was collapsing. They'd rather lose the house than call the mistake. I read the file twist. The numbers don't lie the way people do. 14 months earlier, my parents had taken a home equity line of credit, a HELOC, against the house. The amount, $187,000. The house had been paid off for years, free and clear, the one solid asset they had heading into retirement. They'd borrowed against every dollar of equity. On top of that, my father's cardiac surgery 9 months ago had generated $43,000 in medical bills after insurance. Their combined monthly obligation was more than double their retirement income. They'd made 6 payments, missed 4, and the lender had filed the notice of default in January. Now it was late April. The sale date was June 20th. I sat back in my chair. $187,000 in equity torched. 40 years of mortgage payments gone. The math was ugly and final. Where had the money gone? Not to the house. The gutters were still sagging the last time I drove past. Not to medical bills. Those came after the HELOC and the dates didn't overlap. The HELOC disbursement went out in a single lump sum 14 months ago to an account I didn't recognize. I pulled public UC filings, cross-referenced the date with county business registrations. There it was. A restaurant LLC filed 13 months ago. Registered agent Derrick R. Jagger. My brother's restaurant. The one he'd bragged about on Instagram for exactly 5 months before the posts stopped. The one my mother had called Derek's new venture at Thanksgiving. Like she was introducing a debutante. The one nobody had mentioned since. They'd bet the house on Derek. Literally put up every cent of equity on the golden child's dream kitchen, and the dream had burned down. And they told me nothing. I dug deeper. Couldn't help it. Derek's restaurant had been called Fork and Field. Farm-taught concept, downtown lease, a logo he'd paid a design firm $4,200 to create. He'd posted the grand opening on Facebook with a champagne toast and a caption that said, "Dreams don't wait." My mother had shared it 11 times. Fork and Field lasted 19 weeks. The health department flagged 2 violations in month 3. Yelp reviews mentioned undercooked chicken and a hostess who was visibly annoyed. By month 5, the landlord filed for unpaid rent. Derek shut the doors quietly, deleted the Instagram, and based on the filings, never repaid a cent of the startup capital. The startup capital that came from my parents' house. I could picture the conversation. Derek at the kitchen table, that earnest look he'd perfected by age 12, explaining why this was different, why this time it would work. My mother nodding because Derek's dreams were family projects. My father signing the Helilock paperwork because saying no to Derek wasn't in his vocabulary. They would rather mortgage their retirement than admit their golden child was a bad investment. And when the bill came due and the restaurant folded and the lender started sending certified letters, they would rather lose the house entirely than pick up the phone and call me because would mean admitting I wasn't the mistake. I was the one who could fix it. And that math didn't compute in Diane Georger's universe. I closed the file, opened it again, closed it. Then I pulled up the lender's contact information and stared at it for 10 minutes. Over-responsibility is a reflex. You see the fire, you grabbed the hose, even when the people inside never handed you a key. I didn't sleep that night. Part of me, the rational part, the part that passed the bar and survived single motherhood and stopped expecting birthday calls. That part said, walk away. They didn't ask you. They don't want you. They've spent 33 years making it clear you're the line item they'd cut first. But there was another part. The part that remembered my grandmother in the back bedroom, brushing my hair before school, telling me stories about the garden she'd planted when she was 19. The roses along the fence were hers. The kitchen tile was the pattern she'd picked. That house wasn't just my parents'. It was hers. And she'd died in the bedroom overlooking those roses. And she'd been the only person in that family who ever made me feel like I had a right to exist. And Lily. Lily who drew stick figures of grandparents she barely knew. Lily who asked if Grandma would like her this time. Lily who carried hope around like a lunchbox packed fresh every morning, even when it came back empty every afternoon. I wasn't doing this for my mother. I wasn't doing this for my father. And I sure as hell wasn't doing this for Derek. I was doing this because the house was worth saving, even if the people inside it weren't sure I was. And because I'd never be able to explain to Lily 15 years from now that I had the power to keep her grandparents home. And I let it go because my feelings were hurt. But I wouldn't save them on their terms. If I did this, it would be on mine. I poured another cup of coffee, pulled up the lender's servicing department number, drafted an email. By morning, I had a plan. The transaction was clean legal. 1 phone call and 2 weeks of paperwork. When a borrower defaults on a Helilock and the lender files for foreclosure, the note, the actual debt instrument, can be sold. Lenders do it all the time. They'd rather take 7 cents on the dollar now than gamble on an auction that might net less. I'd handled these transactions for clients dozens of times. I knew the forms, the disclosures, the timeline. I contacted the servicing department, identified myself as a licensed attorney, inquired about purchasing the defaulted note at a negotiated payoff, not the full $187,000 plus fees, but a discounted figure the lender would accept to close the file. After 2 rounds of negotiation and a formal offer letter, we settled on a number. I wired the funds from my savings. It wiped out most of what I'd put away over 7 years of closings and bonuses and skipped vacations, but it was my money, earned my way, and I spent it with my eyes open. The assignment was recorded at the county recorder's office. As of 3 weeks before the party, I held the note. The default was mine to enforce or forgive. Their crisis was sitting in my briefcase. I want to be clear about something. I didn't do this to trap them. I didn't do it for leverage or to hold over their heads at Thanksgiving. I did it because their house was going to be sold on the courthouse steps in 7 weeks, and neither of my parents had the means, the credit, or apparently the pride to ask the one person in the family who could stop it. I planned to give it to them free and clear. The anniversary gift of a lifetime. The manila envelope sat on my desk for 3 days before I put it in the box. Inside it, the recorded assignment of note transferring the lender's position to me, a satisfaction of note. I'd prepared the document that once I signed and recorded it would release the lien, cancel the debt, and leave them with a clean title, and underneath the original notice of trustee's sale, with June 20th date circled in red marker, 3 pieces of paper that told a story your house was dying, your daughter bought it back, here's the release. I'd also drafted a 1-page letter explaining what I'd done in plain English because my mother didn't speak legalese and my father would pretend he did. The letter said, "The note is satisfied. The foreclosure is canceled. The house is yours. The 40th anniversary was May 10th. I decided that would be the moment. Not a phone call, not a certified letter, not a quiet conversation in the kitchen where my mother could control the narrative and my father could nod along. I wanted to hand it to them in front of the people who mattered to them, the family, the church friends, the neighbors, so that for once the story they told about me and the story that was true would be the same story told in the same room at the same time. Was that petty? Maybe I prefer to call it thorough. I slid the envelope into the cream-colored box. Checked the satisfaction one more time, unsigned. I'd sign it at the party in front of everyone. The final flourish. The sale date stared at me from inside the box. June 20th, circled in red. 41 days away. I closed the lid and set the box on the shelf. That evening, I sat Lily down at the kitchen table and explained we were going to Grandma and Grandpa's big party. We're bringing the most important present, sweetheart. The most important one they'll ever get. Lily studied me with those serious brown eyes she got from her absent father and the sense of fairness she got from absolutely nowhere in my gene pool. More important than the earrings, Derek got Grandma for Christmas. Way more. She considered this. Then she untied the navy ribbon from the box, frowned at her lopsided bow from that morning, and retied it with the concentration of a surgeon. The new bow was still lopsided. She didn't care. She tucked her hand-drawn card, the one with the 2 stick figures and the wobbly hearts, under the ribbon so it wouldn't slide off during the drive. There, she announced, "Now it's perfect." I watched her smooth the cream paper with her thumb. This tiny person who loved people who hadn't earned it yet, and I felt the full weight of what I was about to do. I almost didn't go. I stood in that kitchen and almost called the whole thing off, mailed the documents, skipped the party, let the paperwork do the talking without me and my complicated face and my 8-year-old, and all the history we carried just by walking through the door. If you've ever talked yourself out of standing up to your own family, I get it. It took me 33 years. Stay with me because what happened when my daughter handed over that box changed everything. And if this channel speaks to you, subscribe so you don't miss the rest. I didn't mail the documents. I loaded the box into the car and drove. Derek called me the week before the party, first time in 4 months. "Hey, Hannah Banana." He still used the nickname from when I was 6, which would have been charming if it came from a brother who'd ever once defended me at the dinner table. "You going to Mom and Dad's thing? Taking Lily. You wouldn't miss it." I'm actually working on something new, a consulting concept, food service side. Totally different from the restaurant, more scalable. He said scalable the way people say organic at farmers markets. Like the word itself was a business plan. "That's great, Derek." "Yeah, Yeah, it's really coming together. I think Mom and Dad are going to be stoked. I waited. Head didn't ask about the house, didn't mention the helilock, the default, the certified letters from the lender that had been piling up in my parents' mailbox for months. Either he didn't know, which meant my parents had hidden it from their golden child to protect his feelings, or he knew and assumed someone else would fix it. Both options tracked. How are Mom and Dad doing? I asked, leaving the door wide open. Great. You know them, tough as nails. Dad's recovering from the surgery. Mom's planning this party like it's a royal wedding. They're fine. They were not fine. They were 53 days from losing their house. And their son, the one they'd staked everything on, was pitching a consulting concept and calling them tough as nails. See you there, Derek. Can't wait. Oh, you're bringing a gift, right? Mom said something about gifts. I'm bringing a gift. He hung up. I looked at the cream box on the passenger seat, the navy ribbon slightly wrinkled from Lily's third attempt at perfection. Mom and Dad are fine. They always land on their feet. Right. 4 days before the party, my mother called to confirm attendance like she was running a corporate event. You said two. You and Lily. Is that still accurate? Yes, Mom. 2. Derek's bringing a date, a nice girl from his CrossFit gym. I'm rearranging the seating chart. Of course, she was rearranging the seating chart for Derek's date. Of course, I'll sit wherever. You always do. She paused. Her pauses were weapons. Small, precise, time to land. I'm surprised you're coming. Honestly, you've made it very clear how you feel about family gatherings. I bit the inside of my cheek. The satisfaction of note was sitting in my briefcase 3 ft away. I was holding the note on her house. I was the only reason 1847 Birchwood Lane wasn't going to be sold to a stranger in 6 weeks. And she was surprised I was coming. I'll be there, Mom. We're bringing something special. Don't make it about you, Hannah. This is your father's and my day. I wouldn't dream of it. She hung up without saying goodbye. Standard operating procedure. I sat in my car in the firm parking lot and stared through the windshield at nothing. Somewhere in the back of my head, the part of me that still kept score was updating the ledger. Column A, reasons to give her the deed. Column B, reasons to drive home and shred it. Column A was winning, barely, and only because of a grandmother who died 6 years ago and an 8-year-old who still believed in matching plate birthday parties. She had no idea she was inviting the holder of her own mortgage to dinner. The venue was a rented hall off Route 9, the kind of place that does wedding receptions and Rotary Club dinners and 40th anniversaries for couples who want to look like they can still afford it. White tablecloths, rented centerpieces, a DJ setting up in the corner, and above the head a gold foil banner. 40 years, Roger and Diane. 60-some guests filled the room. Aunts, uncles, cousins, church friends, neighbors from Birchwood Lane who'd watched me grow up and probably believed every word Aunt Carol had ever whispered about me. The spread was extravagant. Catered trays of shrimp, a carving station, a 3-tier cake with fondant roses. I did the math instinctively, force of habit from years of closings and budgets, and estimated the party alone cost $4,000 to $5,000. Money they did not have. Money borrowed or charged or conjured from a savings account that was already hemorrhaging. They were celebrating 40 years off marriage inside a party they couldn't afford in a house they were about to lose in front of people they'd lied to about all of it. I parked around back. Lily smoothed her dress in the rearview mirror. Blue cotton, her favorite. She'd picked it herself because Grandma likes blue. Ready? I held the cream box in my lap. Ready? She reached over and straightened the navy ribbon, which had shifted during the drive. Her card. The stick figures and the wobbly hearts peeked out from under the bell. I curried the box. Lily held my free hand. We walked in through the side entrance, past the DJ and the catering trays and 40 years of curated mythology. The room smelled like shrimp cocktail and competing perfumes. Someone was already 2 glasses into the champagne. Here we go. We'd been inside for 90 seconds before Aunt Carol found us. She appeared at my elbow like she'd been waiting behind a centerpiece. Hair freshly set, smile calibrated to look warm from a distance, but read entirely different up close. Hannah, you actually came. Hi, Carol. She looked at Lily the way a health inspector looks at a kitchen. Aren't you getting big? Diane's going to be so surprised. We brought a present, Lily said brightly. Carol's eyes moved to the box. How thoughtful. She turned to a cluster of women at the next table and said, loud enough for me to hear. 40 years married, and the cold one finally shows up. I moved Lily to my other side, away from Carol. Reflex. My parents were at the head table. My father was shaking hands with a neighbor, his color still not quite right from the surgery, thinner than I remembered. My mother was arranging place cards, adjusting silverware angles with the precision of someone who believed table settings were a moral act. Neither of them looked up when we walked in. I steered Lily toward my Uncle Pete, my father's younger brother, a retired electrician who'd always been the only relative who treated me like a full member of the family. He hugged Lily first, lifting her off the ground, then he put a hand on my shoulder and leaned close. Your grandma would have been proud of you, Hannah. She always was. I blinked hard twice. Thank you, Uncle Pete. He nodded toward the head table. You okay being here? Ask me in 2 hours. He squeezed my shoulder and went back to his table. Lily tugged my hand and pointed at the cake. I let her look but kept her close. This room wasn't safe for her yet. Halfway through the appetizer course, I excused myself to the restroom. The hallway led past the hall's small kitchen, and through the half-open door, I heard my mother's voice. Tight, controlled, the voice she used when she was managing a crisis and didn't want anyone to know there was one. Derek says the investor is interested. He says 2 more weeks. My father's voice lower. Derek's been saying 2 more weeks since Christmas. Don't start, not tonight. Deanne, the letters are I said not tonight. A dish clink-egged hard on a counter. We are not discussing the house at our anniversary party. We'll figure it out. Derek will come through. Derek couldn't come through a revolving door, a beat of silence. Then my mother with that steel edge I knew better than my own name. At least he's trying. At least he didn't just disappear. She meant me, the daughter who disappeared. The one who stopped visiting because they treated her child like a defective appliance. My father again quieter. Maybe we should have. No, we are not asking her. We are not giving her the satisfaction. That word landed like a slap through the wall. Satisfaction. As if saving their house would be some kind of trophy for me. As if asking me for help was worse than losing everything. I stood in that hallway for 30 seconds, maybe 40, long enough to confirm 3 things I already suspected. The house was their crisis. Derek was their fantasy. And I was their last resort, the one they'd rather drown than reach for. I went back to my seat. Lily was eating a shrimp tail first, happy as a clam. I kissed the top of her head and set the cream box on the empty chair beside me. After the salad course, my father stood up to give his toast. He tapped his glass with a butter knife. The room quieted. 60 faces turned toward the head table where my mother sat with her hands folded and her smile lacquered on like furniture finish. 40 years, my father began. He cleared his throat. 40 years with this woman, and I'd do it all again. Polite applause, he continued. He talked about the early years, the lean times, the house on Burwood Lane Thatty had made a home. He talked about family. He talked about legacy. He talked about Derek, our son Derek, the one who took a chance on his dream, who put himself out there, who's already working on something new because that's the kind of man we raised. Deanne and I couldn't be prouder. The room clapped. Derek, seated near the front with his CrossFit date, did a modest wave that had clearly been rehearsed. Then my father's eyes swept the room, landed briefly on me, and moved on. And Hannah and little Lily are here tonight, too. Good to have you, sweetheart. He raised his glass to the son who never gave us a day of worry. Glasses clink-egged. People drank. I smiled because the alternative was making a scene and I wasn't built for scenes. Lily waved at her grandfather. He didn't notice. Derek was the paragraph. I was the footnote. Even at a party I was attending for the sole purpose of saving their house, my father couldn't spare a full sentence for his younger child. And he didn't even realize the irony. The son, who never gave them a day of worry, had given them a helilock, a failed restaurant, and a foreclosure notice. I excused myself to the restroom again, locked the door, ran cold water over my wrists. The mirror showed a woman in a blazer with tired eyes and good posture and a cream-colored box waiting for her at the table. I stared at her. I came to give them a home. I would not also give them my self-respect. The plan hadn't changed. The gift was real. The documents were prepared. I was going to hand my parents the deed to their own house free and clear, because it was the right thing to do, and because my grandmother's roses were still blooming along the fence, and because Lily deserved to know her mother chose generosity over grudges. But something had shifted. I'd walked in hopping that stupid, stubborn hope that they might meet me halfway, that my father might look up when I entered, that my mother might say hello to her granddaughter, that someone at that table might acknowledge that I existed as more than a line item. They hadn't, and they wouldn't. Not because they were evil, not because they lacked the capacity, but because the story they'd told themselves for 33 years was load-bearing. I was the mistake. Derek was the investment. Changing that story meant admitting the math had been wrong the whole time, and neither of my parents was strong enough for that kind of audit. Right here is where I decided I was done begging to be loved. If you reach that point with someone in your family, this next part is for you. Comment boundaries if you've had to set one. I read them all. Then let's finish this together. I dried my hands, straightened my blazer, walked back to the table, and picked up the box. Time to give them the house. They cut the cake at 8:15. 3 tiers, fondant roses, a little plastic bride and groom on top that looked nothing like either of my parents. Everyone gathered around. Phones came out. My mother held the knife like she was performing surgery. After the cake was served and the plates were being passed, I saw my opening. Lily. I knelt beside her chair. You remember what we talked about? She nodded. Her eyes were huge. She'd been holding it together all night. The cold reception, the being overlooked, the grandfather who didn't notice her wave with the patience of a kid who's learned that her worth in this room is conditional, but hasn't yet figured out it shouldn't be. You're going to carry the box to Grandma and Grandpa and say what we practiced. Can you do that? The happy anniversary thing exactly. She slid off her chair. I handed her the cream box. The navy ribbon was slightly wrinkled from the car ride and from being set down and picked up half a dozen times. Lily held it with both hands against her chest, the way you'd hold something that weighed more than physics could explain. I walked beside her toward the head table. 60 pairs of eyes tracked us. The murmuring dropped. Someone, I think it was Uncle Pete, set down his fork. My mother looked up from her cake plate. My father turned. Derek glanced over from his date. The room got quiet the way rooms get quiet when they sense something is about to happen and don't know yet whether it's good or bad. I stopped 3FT from the table and let Lily walk the last few steps alone. The box was light in her arms, light enough for an 8-year-old, heavy enough to change everything. Lily walked up to the head table with the careful, deliberate steps of a child who knows the whole room is watching and wants to get it right. She stopped directly in front of my mother, held out the cream box with both hands, the navy ribbon catching the overhead light, her card with the stick figures, and the wobbly hearts tucked neatly under the bow. Happy anniversary, Grandma and Grandpa. Her voice was clear and practiced and proud. We made it just for you. The room melted. 60 people did that collective awe that audiences do when a child does something pure. That involuntary sound that means this is the best part. My father blinked for 1/2 second. Something moved behind his eyes, something soft, something almost grateful. He reached for the box. My mother got there first. She looked at Lily. She looked at the box. She looked at me standing 3 feet back with my hands folded and my blazer straight and 7 years of birthday cards she'd never acknowledged sitting in a filing cabinet in her head. And I saw it, the calculation, the 40-year-old story running its program. Hannah is the mistake. Hannah's gifts are obligations. Hannah is here because she wants something. My mother's jaw tightened. She didn't reach for the box. She didn't open it. She didn't even touch the ribbon. The room held its breath. The DJ had stopped setting up. A cousin had a champagne glass frozen halfway to her mouth. My mother looked at the box like it might bite her. Every person in that hall was watching. Every neighbor, every church friend, every cousin Aunt Carol had ever whispered to. The silence lasted 4 seconds. It felt like 40. My mother pushed the box across the table. Not gently, not politely. She put her palm flat against the cream paper and shoved it sideways like she was clearing a dish she hadn't ordered. The navy ribbon snagged on a fork. Lily's card, the stick figures, the wobbly hearts, the left-leaning cursive slipped out from under the bow and fluttered to the floor, face down next to my mother's chair. Lily's hands were still out, open, empty. My mother didn't look at the card. She looked at me and she said it. You were always my biggest mistake. Not quietly, not under her breath. Loud enough for the second row of tables to hear without leaning. Loud enough for Uncle Pete to set down his water glass. Loud enough for the DJ to stop adjusting his speakers and stare. 60 people heard it. Some of them gasped, some of them didn't. Because if you'd been in this family long enough, you'd heard some version of it before. Just never this public, never this raw, never aimed at a woman standing in front of her 8-year-old daughter. Lily looked up at me. Her lower lip trembled once, then locked. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I watched my mother's face and saw everything I'd ever needed to see and had been too hopeful to read clearly. The resentment that predated me, the pregnancy that derailed her plans, the 33 years of projecting her own unprocessed regret onto the child who'd had the audacity to exist. She wasn't angry at the gift. She was angry at me for bringing it. Because acceptance meant gratitude, and gratitude meant I mattered and I wasn't allowed to matter. Not in her math. The room was silent, the kind of silent that has weight. Carol looked at her plate. Derrick's CrossFit date looked at Derrick. Derrick looked at his phone. My father's chair scraped the floor. My father stood up. For one breath, one held, stupid, desperate breath, I thought he was going to correct her. I thought 40 years of following her lead might buckle under the weight of what she'd just said in front of 60 people. And he might, for the first time in my entire life, choose me. He didn't. We don't need your gift. Take it and get out. He said it with the same voice he used to tell the dog to get off the couch. Flat practice like he'd rehearsed it in the shower that morning just in case I showed up and tried to be part of the family. A fork dropped somewhere to the left. A woman, I think the pastor's wife, put her hand over her mouth. Lily pressed her face into my hip and I laughed. I didn't plan it. It wasn't performance. It wasn't revenge. It was the sound a person makes when the thing they've feared their entire life finally happens. And it's so much smaller than they imagined. 33 years of wondering if I was enough for these people. And the answer was right here, delivered in a rented hall with fondant roses and 60 witnesses and a gold banner that said 40 years. No, I was not enough. I was never going to be enough. And for the first time in my life, standing in that room with shrimp trays and champagne glasses and my daughter's face pressed into my blazer, I was perfectly fine with that answer. The laugh came from somewhere deep and genuine and exhausted. My mother's composure cracked. She hadn't expected laughter. She'd expected tears or silence or the door. The same 3 responses I'd given her for 3 decades. Laughter wasn't in her playbook. What's so funny? She snapped. I stopped laughing, took a breath, looked at my father, then at my mother, then at the cream box sitting crooked on the table with the ribbon half off and my daughter's card still on the floor. Do you want to know what's in the box? The room leaned forward. I picked up the box, straightened the ribbon out of habit, pulled the manila envelope from inside, and held it up so the room could see it. 3 weeks ago, I said, I found out that this house, your house, the one on Birchwood Lane, the one Grandma planted roses in front of, is in foreclosure. My mother's face went white. My father sat down heavily like his legs had been cut. You took out a $187,000 line of credit against the house 14 months ago. You used the money to fund Derrick's restaurant. I looked at Derrick. His CrossFit date looked at Derrick. 60 people looked at Derrick. He stared at the tablecloth like it contained instructions. The restaurant failed. The money's gone. You've missed 4 payments. The lender filed a notice of default in January, and the house is scheduled to be sold at auction on June 20th. I held up the manila envelope. That's 41 days from tonight. No one moved. 3 weeks ago, I bought the note from the lender, negotiated, paid it off with my savings. Every dollar I've earned in 7 years of working nights and weekends and skipping vacations, while you told Carol I was the daughter who abandoned you. My mother opened her mouth. Nothing came out. I set the envelope on the table between the pushed-aside box and the 3-tier cake. This envelope contains the recorded assignment of your note to me and a satisfaction of note. I prepared to release the lien and cancel the debt. Once I sign and record it, the house is yours, free and clear. No auction, no foreclosure. It was your anniversary gift. I let that sit. My 8-year-old carried it across this room for you, and you shoved it off the table and called me your biggest mistake. The deed's in the box. I left the sentence in the air. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I didn't look away. I stood there in my blazer with my daughter against my hip. And I let 60 people do the math on their own. Carol turned the color of raw chicken. The pastor's wife covered her face with both hands. Uncle Pete was nodding slowly, the way people nod when they've been waiting a long time for a truth to come out. My mother gripped the edge of the table. Her mouth moved. "Hannah, you can't, just I can," I said quietly. "I hold the note. Your house, your debt, my decision." I picked up the manila envelope, slid it back into the cream box, closed the lid, the satisfaction of note, the one I'd planned to sign at the table, the final flourish, the document that would have made their house safe, stayed unsigned. I folded it and put it in my blazer pocket. Then I bent down, picked up Lily's card from the floor. The stick figures were smudged where someone had stepped on it. The hearts were still there. I tucked it into my jacket. Then I picked up my daughter. She wrapped her arms around my neck and buried her face in my collar. She didn't cry, she just held on. The way kids hold on when they know the adults have failed. And the only safe thing in the room is the person carrying them. "Hannah," my father's voice broke on the second syllable. "Hannah, wait, I didn't wait. Hannah, please." My mother stood up. Her chair hit the wall behind her. "You can't just, that's our house." I turned at the door. 60 faces, some stunned, some relieved, some crying. Derrick had his head in his hands. "It was your gift," I said. "It would have been signed tonight. You chose differently." I walked out. The parking lot was dark and quiet. The bass from the DJ's speaker test thumped through the walls. Lily's breath was warm against my neck. "Mom," she whispered. "Yeah, baby, is Grandma going to be okay?" I opened the car door, buckled her in, smoothed her hair. "Grandma's going to have to figure some things out." I set the cream box on the passenger seat. The navy ribbon was creased and half untied, wrecked from being pushed and pulled and shoved across a table. Lily had tied it that morning with such care. I started the engine and drove us home. Neither of us looked back. The calls started that night. My mother's voicemail at 10:47 p.m. crying, but the kind of crying that still had structure, still had an agenda. "Hannah, you humiliated us in front of everyone." In front of the church. "You had no right to say those things. I didn't mean it the way. You always twist everything." She didn't say sorry. She said I humiliated her. My father's voicemail at 6:15 the next morning. Anger first, then something that sounded almost broken. "That was a hell of a stunt, Hannah. A hell of a you can't, just we were wrong. We were wrong. Okay, we do need, please come back. We need to talk about the house." 5 words. They kept replaying the deeds in the box. Derrick called twice. Didn't leave a voicemail the first time. The second time, 3 words. "Fix this, Hannah," like I was tech support for a family he'd bankrupted. Over 5 days. 14 calls from my mother, 9 from my father, 2 from Derrick, 1 from Aunt Carol that I deleted without listening. 2 texts from cousins I hadn't spoken to in years, both saying some version of, "Heard what happened. Are you okay?" The church prayer chain had apparently been updated. 3 neighbors from Burwood Lane reached out to say they'd had no idea about the foreclosure. One of them, Mrs. Delgado, told me she always thought I was the strong one, and she was sorry no one had said it sooner. The story my parents had told for 33 years that I was the problem, the cold one, the biggest mistake, had collapsed in a rented hall in front of the exact audience they'd built it for. And the rubble was everywhere. I didn't answer any of their calls. Not yet. I needed them to sit in it, not as punishment, as preparation. I had something to offer, but this time it would come with terms. On day 6, I called my father, just him. I'm not going to make you homeless, I said. That was never the plan, and it's not who I am. He was quiet for a long time. Then what do you want? Respect for me for Lily in writing. I drafted the paperwork the night before, clean and simple. I'd sign the satisfaction, release the lien, and cancel every dollar of the debt. In exchange, they'd place the house in a trust, a life estate for them, Lily as the remainder beneficiary. When both my parents passed, the house would go to my daughter, their granddaughter, the one my mother hadn't looked at once during the party. Derek's name appeared nowhere in the documents. My father agreed in 30 seconds. My mother took 2 days. When she finally called, her voice was different, smaller. She didn't cry, not the manipulative kind. Anyway, she said one thing I hadn't expected. I was afraid of you, Hannah, afraid you'd turn out to be everything I wasn't. And you did, and I couldn't stand it. She'd spent 40 years afraid of being needed by the daughter she swore she never wanted. It was the most honest thing she'd ever said to me, and it wasn't an apology. It wasn't redemption. It was a woman standing at the edge of her own damage, looking down and describing what she saw. I didn't forgive her, but I heard her. The documents were signed on a Tuesday, notarized, recorded. The house stayed on Burwood Lane. My grandmother's roses kept blooming along the fence. Lily's card, the stick figures, the wobbly hearts. I framed it and hung it in our hallway. My kids' drawings don't get wasted on people who won't keep them. I stopped waiting for my mother to call me anything but a mistake the day I realized my worth was never hers to hand back. That's my story. If someone made you feel like the family mistake, hear me. You're not. The full breakdown's in the description. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next.